And with that being said, what does the strongest, happiest, healthiest version of a person look like? And if we align our actions toward that, we would invariably, inevitably become that. What does that look like for you with coaching? What is your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm hearing is, how do we actually begin the process of helping people uncover what the healthiest, happiest
If
version of
somebody
them is?
was listening to this and never hired a coach, which I strongly recommend that everybody does. I have one, I'm sure you have one in some area. But let's say they listen to this and this is their push. What are we telling them to do?
Yeah. This is where it's definitely is tricky, because the most important piece to this puzzle of bridging that gap between what we think we want and what we actually want, or who we want to be, ultimately stems down to developing a skill that I think is lost a lot now, both in because of how easy it is to distract ourselves, but also just because we have every reason not to, which is developing self-awareness. So
That's good.
the problem is we have so many opportunities now. It's a term that I use in my program called radical introspection. Introspection, of course, is the ability to look inwards at yourself, your thoughts, your beliefs, your values, your behaviors, and really evaluate, are they aligned with what you want? Or even if you're not even comparing it to something, maybe you don't know what that thing is yet, can you just identify what's happening, what's actually happening? And radical in the sense that you have to be able to do that even when you don't like the answers. Right? It's easy for people to be introspective about their good qualities, but now we have every opportunity to distract ourselves from the pieces of us that we're not happy with, or that might be actively detracting from the things that we want. Right? We see this in relationships all the time as an easy example. People who get into relationships, if they have baggage or trauma or things that they bring into that relationship, the way they behave, the way they speak to their partner, the way that they believe certain things about how the relationship should work, they can be completely oblivious to those things. And in turn, even if those are the things that are causing them to fail, we'll find some other reason to pin the blame. Right? So the first step is learning how to develop a skill of radical introspection. And there's a couple of ways that I recommend doing this. Again, if you're starting from scratch, a good way to do this is with a qualified coach that can kind of help you explore these areas, right? They ask those hard questions. They give you the space, distraction-free, to think about these things and talk it out and do all of that. But if you're starting from scratch and you don't have that opportunity, obviously Friends is a great place to start as well if you just need the conversation piece. But find some time to in two ways. One, find some time to sit alone in silence and actually just think about how you're acting on a daily basis. What does your day look like? Journaling is great if that helps you, writing it down, actually seeing it from a different perspective other than what's going on in your mind. Because of course, everything we think about is through a certain lens, and often that lens is meant to protect us. So that's why it's hard to be self-aware of our negative qualities, because we filter that out. But learning how to take that lens off and see things for how they are, it's a great place to start. Distraction-free and just sitting with it, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable. Where can you take responsibility? Where are you going wrong? Even if you think something else is the cause for the failure or the setback or whatever, find a way that it's your fault. How could it possibly be your fault?
I love that. Can we sit on that for a second?
Yes.
For two things.
Yes.
Number one, I have this radical philosophy that even if so often we place, well, they did this, they did this, they did this, it's natural. It's natural. It's a protective mechanism, and it's hard to look inward. With that being said, it does always take two to tango.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say you and I get into an argument, and it is 97% your fault. I'm going to take that 3%. This is what I do with anyone around me, so buckle up if you're going to be around me. And I want you to own, myself included, 100% of that 3% and completely ignore the 97% that has nothing to do with you, because you can't control that. But that 100% of that 3% is your baby.
Absolutely.
Nurture it.
Yeah.
Nurture it. And then back to the lens. This is something we do look at life through a lens, and often that lens is sort of like a kaleidoscope. And the reason that it looks in that funky different prism, a bunch of different prisms like a kaleidoscope does, is because we have this piece of our life over here, and this relationship over here, and this trauma over here, and this good thing over here, and this skewed perspective over here. And it creates this kaleidoscope that we see life through, but it's not very clear. What lens is the clearest? Why does a camera, when you're taking a picture in the dark, we have a wider lens because it lets in the most light.
There you go.
So when we step back and look at that whole big picture, but then as I coach, I don't care what the question is, the answer is love. That to me is the light. How can I approach this with a loving perspective for myself? But that is truth. Because in order to work on ourselves the most, whether it be any area, we have to approach it with love, not with loathing. But we have to be honest or we're never going to fix it.
And speaking of your prism analogy, it reminds me of a quote from a book that I read recently and I loved it. And I'm actually, speaking of which, I'm trying to get Jamie Filer to read it. She's got it on hold in the library, so when she comes on and do her live, you should remind her about it.
Jamie
just so I give her.
Filer is incredible, by the way. Like,
absolutely.
Oh, I love that.
And the quote from the book was, people don't see the world through their eyes. They see it through their entire life. So as you said,
what book is this?
What?
What book is this?
Actually, the one I got right back here. By David Brooks. How to Know a Person, the Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen.
That's on my list now.
Add it to the list. One of the best books I've read in a while. But to your prism analogy, right, there's all that past experience, that trauma, the successes, the failures, the setbacks, everything that was our fault and wasn't our fault. And that each experience that we have, every moment of every day, influences the lens through which we see the world. And so taking ownership, as you said, of that 3% that's your fault, of the pieces that's all, because we, by nature, have to participate in the world. And because we have to participate, we have some responsibility in every experience that we have, good and bad, and being able to own that. The interesting thing that you mentioned too about that 3%, again, using the relationship example, is taking that ownership and sharing it, especially if you're to blame for something, owning that 100% of that 3 requires a bit of vulnerability, which is why I think a lot of people struggle. The interesting thing, though, is even if it's 97% not your fault, if you take ownership over the 3% and you show that vulnerability, it will bring down the defenses of others, and they'll be more likely to look at the 97% that was their fault. But most importantly, because I know you're going to say something, but before that, most importantly, if you express the vulnerability for your 3%, it lowers your own defensive mechanisms too. So you can be more vulnerable with yourself, and you don't get so defensive about the shortcomings that you experience.
I mean, this one got heavy as hell. This one got super heavy, man. I'm here for it. We're going to get like one view ever on this conversation. People are like, man, I'm nah. You can pull a Kevin Hart and be like, pineapples, I don't like it. No, pineapples, no.
That's all right. This is the way I know how to be, man. I don't know how to be any other way.
Yeah, I do. But I do love all of that. And there have been several instances in my life over the past year where I've done that. And I just walked up and I went, hey, may I real quick? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, I did this, I did this, I did this, and I did this. Will you please forgive me? And they were like, which then allowed an open dialogue. And the implied point is this, if I'm hearing it right. When was the last time we did that with ourselves?
Absolutely.
Because you said something that's going to scare a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sit alone. Now, I coach with a lot of faith-based principles, and there's one that is be still and know. Now, I cut that quote off, obviously, but my mama, yes, I'm a Southern boy, so it's my mama. She checkmated me about a year ago. Carmi, who just signed in, has heard this. I was running to and fro. I was in Miami and Newport and LA and New York, and it's all over because people wanted to hear me run my face for some reason. And I called her, and I had to go to Detroit that next weekend. And she goes, she said, son, you sound tired. I said, Mama, I am. And she said, even Jesus went away to rest. And I went, I know, Mama. And she said, do you think you're better than Jesus? I was like, what do you want me to say to that? Like, I guess I'm not going to Detroit. Like, I don't, like, but I say all of that to say this. If we're living through FOMO, because FOMO is a real thing, and we'll get back to fitness, but this is identity and this is personal development. This just turned personal development here, which it is, which fitness is. It's part of it. If it scares you to sit alone and be quiet, then that's probably exactly what you should do. I got to go get my pen. Hold on.
He threw it across the room, and now we got to make sure we have his throat again later. You gotta. So there's an analogy I like to use for this fear of being vulnerable with yourself and sitting alone. And again, fitness is self-development. Fitness coaching is life coaching. So everything we're talking about, even though not directly fitness, it all ties together. It all comes back, right? But sitting alone, being able to recognize the areas, the shortcomings that we have, the responsibility that we have in our negative experiences, the vulnerability that creates, and the power in that reminds me of, I was watching a documentary, and it may have since been debunked, so don't come at me in the comments later about this, but there was a documentary about wolves that I was watching. And it was going over the theory about why humans decided to, and the ways in which they domesticated wolves to become dogs, the cute floofs that we know now, right? And one of the leading theories was, in our hunter-gatherer times, not to go too far left field, nomadic people, right, setting up camp, hunting, doing the whole deal, is that wolves would stay close to the human tribes, groups, and basically live off of their scraps as scavengers. And so they would not be obviously right on them, but they'd be in the vicinity, just generally kind of hovering, shadows, if you will. And then over time, as other predators threatened the humans, by proxy, they were also threatening the cubs of the wolves. And so the wolves, to protect their cubs, inadvertently protected the humans. And the humans, recognizing this, saw the value in that. And then they brought in the cubs and then began the process of domestication. Right? Now, of course, prior to that time, the wolves were a challenge for the humans because they posed their own threat. They would steal things, the food and whatnot. They would threaten every way of being that the humans were. And so really the humans had a couple of options. They could try to eradicate the wolves, but that's just not how nature works, right? They're always going to reproduce. They're going to come back, right? They could ignore the wolves, but then that would continue to pose the threat that they had on their own young, the humans, right? But instead they chose the domestication route. They chose to leverage the power of the wolves, domesticate them to become dogs, man's best friend, to aid in hunting, to aid in protection and defense of their young, of their camps. And the reason that sticks out to me, and what we're talking about, this idea of sitting with our vulnerabilities, is I think what people are most afraid of is uncovering their demons that we all have, right? And a lot of people try to get rid of that in a couple of ways. They either ignore them, which never works because they always come back. They try to eradicate it, which it's a part of you. It never goes away. And so this process of sitting and developing self-awareness, developing radical introspection, understanding and taking responsibility for your shortcomings, and understanding that you can get better. That's the process of domesticating your demons. So you're leveraging that.
I love that so much. You're actually leveraging those things. And it goes back to when I was listening to Bedros Keuilian speak at the Silverback Summit. And he said, we have two things. We have the human animal and the human being. The human animal is impulsive. The human animal is reactive. And the human animal is selfish. The human being is proactive. The human being acts. And the human being serves others. And I think that fits perfectly. And if anybody listening doesn't know who Bedros Keuilian is, you should. And he's a great guy. I had a chance to speak with him for a while, and he's an awesome guy. He is who he shows who he is. And I think you bring up an interesting point, and I'm going to bring this back around. I still have something in my throat, and I'm holding onto my pen for dear life. But it is this. So often, we see obesity. Like, most people don't wake up saying, I'm okay with being obese. Most people don't wake up with saying, I'm okay being out of shape, or any of those things. But often we have learned to use food as comfort. But comfort from what? And I am a firm believer, if it didn't cause the problem, it can't solve it. It's a very just quick tip for people. Like, and I am a subject matter expert on this from and like personal standpoint of being a recovered alcoholic drug addict, but also having studied this formally. But if this drink didn't cause my problem, this drink can't solve it. It can only distract from it. And what happens when you don't treat a wound? It festers and it gets infected. And that spillover is what you're trying to treat, but we're often with, let's stick with nutrition here, with your macros and all of these other things and these fad diets and the ketos and the carnivores and blah, 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 blah. You're treating a symptom, not the source. And we go, but I've coped. Coping is a way of saying you're limping. You're not actually walking through life at the pace you should because you're limping. You've just been doing it so long, you don't even recognize it anymore. Go treat the wound. And that is going to be possibly harder than the original wound itself because you built up scars and calluses on top of it. And I can tell you every time I write about it, every time I pray about it, every time I work on it, every new level, there's a new devil. And you're going to be like, yay, I fixed it. Ah, crap. There's another one. Like, I'll be very vulnerable here for a second. Very vulnerable. I have a photo shoot tomorrow. That terrifies me. I've spoken on stages all over the country. But I realize why it terrifies me is when I speak, it's not about me. It's about serving others. Being in front of that camera is about me. And diets on point, like abs are out, whatever. I'm still going to vomit thinking about being in front of that camera. So the past 2 nights, I binge ate. And in the middle of the night, I woke up and went, what are you protecting? Because there's something in there that I haven't faced yet. So I woke up and I reached out to one of the best people I know when it comes to emotional eating, and that's Jeb Stuart Johnson. And I said, hey, buddy, I need your help. So we have a call after this. And I say that not for anybody to go, oh man, that sucks, or that's stupid because you have a photo shoot and you already have abs. It's just say we're all struggling. And we all have our different devil at a different level. And there's power in that. There's strength in vulnerability,
Absolutely.
not weakness.
Absolutely. Because as you said, you need to understand what, obviously the eating in this case is the coping mechanism, and the coping mechanism is not the solution. So it's not going to solve your problem. And if it's a genuine problem, problems only get worse with time, right? If it's a problem and it goes away on its own, it was never a problem. Right?
I like that.
And it's interesting too, kind of continuing our full circle back to identity in fitness particular, is the ease with which we find the ability to cope with things like food. Obviously for the chemical reasons, the dopamine hit, the ease of access, the availability, all of that plays an integral part of that. But even more so, how can we want one thing and consistently do something that opposes that? So I want to make sure I leave people with this idea, for those of us who might be unfamiliar with, it's probably one of the most widely studied psychological principles or phenomenons, and it's something called cognitive dissonance.
I use that term all the time.
Oh yeah, because it's that powerful, right? And so again, for those who might be unfamiliar, cognitive dissonance is the uncomfortable feeling we experience if we have an incongruence between our beliefs and our behavior. So if we believe that we want a healthy diet, we want to achieve this certain body type, we want to feel more energy, we want to be happier, we want to be more confident, we want all the positive things that exercise and a healthy diet gives us. But we find ourselves through habitual action, through coping mechanism, usually subconsciously through learned behavior, we're doing the opposite. We're binge eating, we're going for takeout, we're eating junk food, we're not moving, we're sedentary, whatever the case is. Part of the reason it's so challenging to overcome that is because we are master rationalizers. We can play the best of Jedi mind tricks on ourselves. And so we will find ways to justify doing the very actions that take us away from what we ultimately want. I'm eating this junk food because I had a busy day. I'm eating this junk food because I earned it, because I got up early to work out. I'm not going to work out today because I've already gone 3 days and I deserve a rest. It's all of they're all good excuses. We're great at coming up with good excuses. And so the inability to be honest with yourself, to have that radical introspection, prevents you from being able to see through those rationalizations and those justifications, to stop doing them.
So good.
And so the ability to develop that skill allows you, in a more practical sense, to be able to recognize when you're going against behaviors that you want to be doing. It becomes very clear. It becomes the bright neon sign instead of just the quiet whatever.
The whisper.
Sorry.
The whisper.
All right, go ahead.
Neon sign over the whisper. This ain't right.
Oh, we're back.
So what?
I lost you for a second.
Yeah. Said we have those whispers. You know this isn't right. You know this isn't right. Come on. Come on. And then finally, we get the neon sign. And hopefully, by the time we realize it, the neon sign isn't something we might not be able to recover from.
Right. It's that skill allows you to effectively label the problem. Right.
Was the
We see this.
burger my problem? The burger wasn't my problem. The ice cream wasn't my problem at all. It's a symptom.
Exactly. Labeling the problem is 80% of the way to solving it.
Well, I'm going to comment on that one real quick. Got to. That one's near and dear to my heart.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes, congrats on that. Go
so how can, so we have the identity. We have, now one thing that a lot of people struggle with is they think that they have to become that person before they can identify as it. Now, because of that comment right there, I'm going to speak on this, and then I would love your take. I was going to ask you for yours, but I'm going to speak on this one as a subject matter expert for the person that commented it's 9 days sober. And this is not a very, this is against the mainstream. Shocking. Okay. People are like, oh my gosh, you're a recovering alcoholic. No, I'm not. I'm recovered. Well, once you're an addict, you're always an addict. Not my opinion. Because here's the thing. I don't identify as an alcoholic because my actions dictate my identity. I don't drink and I don't do drugs anymore. Thus, I'm no longer an alcoholic. When you continue to say, and this carries over into fitness directly, if I say I'm a recovering alcoholic, that means that going back to it is still on the table. No, it's not. If I say I am so my identity is that of a beloved child of God, who is a happy, healthy Christian man who leaves everyone he finds better than he found them. If it doesn't line up with that, I'm not doing it. It makes things very, very clear. And people go, well, I'm not healthy yet. What do your actions say?
Absolutely.
We look at things as a destination, and you have to be at the destination. And I use this analogy all of the time. Alex, let's say that Vegas was a vacation for you, which it was not. We were all very tired, and it was incredible. Did you wait to say, I'm on vacation until you got to Vegas, or the second you started packing your bags and were leaving your house and clocked out of work?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. That second, you didn't wait until you got to Vegas to say, I'm on vacation.
Yeah.
So why then do we do that when we say, well, once I get a six-pack, I'm going to be healthy? And the six-pack doesn't even mean you're healthy in the first place. Often it means you're not. But that is the when and the where, not the what and the who.
Absolutely.
The what?
And, you know, it's interesting. We see it.
Go ahead, please.
We see this in the psych research with motivation, and I know you know this, and many people have probably heard this. Most people wait to feel the inspiration of motivation to act on a certain goal. But the reality is, what we know now is taking action on the goal can actually breed the motivation that you feel to keep going. You don't need to be motivated to start. And in fact, starting can sometimes lead to the motivation. So it's a directional relationship. It can be one or the other. They both lead to each other, right? And it's the same way with you say of adopting an identity. We can wait to step into the role of that identity to acknowledge that that's who we are, or since we're not there yet, we can adopt that identity and it will get us to those actions. And it's interesting because this is why in motivation theory, this is why just in fitness coaching in general, community is so important for so many things. Not only for the extra inspiration and encouragement and motivation of being around those like-minded people. This is why events like the Real Coaches Summit is such a powerful thing, being around those people, being in that community. Because when you're around the people who have already achieved the thing that you want, and they set that standard as the normal for your world, it's easier for you to adopt the identity.
Yeah. And I am going to lean into the way that I would coach it. Okay. And I don't beat people with my faith or anything. Like it's just how I coach with most of my people. And if that doesn't resonate, great. Hire Alex. Hire Sam Forget. Hire Aram. Like that's anybody I follow. Right? When Jesus went up to the pool and looked at the man that had been paralyzed for over 30 years. He said, "Get up." And the dude got up. But the next thing he told him was this: grab your mat and walk away. Now, why? The interesting thing there is this: everybody else at the pool was blind, paralyzed, or a leper. He knew. Why would he be able to believe that he could stay healed if everyone around him had the same affliction? And he said, "But I don't know people like you guys." Here's a cool thing. Ed Milet has no idea who I am, but he's in my circle because I listen to him all the time. Right? Like, this book right here is one of my all-time favorites. John Maxwell has no idea who I am, but we talk all the time. Your circle doesn't just have to be those people that know who you are. It can be the podcast you listen to. It can be the Instagram live that you listen to. It can be all of those things, and the books that you read. So you've got hope, and you're not alone.
Absolutely.
And that's fun.
And that would in terms of identity or adopting the new identity that somebody wants, and they're struggling with where to start. Other than learning to cultivate the skill of radical introspection, my biggest piece of this is get around the people who are already doing the things you want to be doing. Because environment, and we often don't realize it, plays such a crucial role into how we think, how we behave, who we become. So just being around it. This is why working with a coach can be so helpful, because you have that built-in community of someone who's giving you new ideas, new insights, new perspectives, helping you shift the way that you think, especially if you don't have a community in your area that affords you the ability to be around those people. This is why I love the online coaching space so much, because it's great to be physically in person with people and create that experience, but being able to reach people from afar who might be on an island in their life, who might not have anyone in their immediate vicinity that they can look to for that community, for that example of what their normal should be. We can leverage technology to create that community for them from afar.
Love that. Love that. Ironically, I just posted something today on people, like red clues of people not to follow.
Equally important, right?
Well, it is. If you are shifting your identity, the people around you, I have another life philosophy for me, and I encourage people to use it. And this is not a selfish thing. It really is. People often say, get around people that make you better, or that make you want to be better. Get in those rooms. The implied missing piece here is this, that nobody seems to want to say. If you're not wanting to be better and striving to be better and striving to be better, why would they let you in the room? But I have a philosophy that if someone is in my life and they're not lifting me up and making me better and holding me accountable, I'll take that one. They're not in it. There is that age-old saying of iron sharpens iron. The missing piece there is what happens when iron strikes iron. There's sparks. Those people are going to trigger you sometimes. And when you get triggered, celebrate. Celebrate, because it just uncovered something else you get to work on in yourself. And that's rad.
Absolutely. And you raise a good point too about being surrounded by people who are also going to lift you up and who are also going to inspire you. And I think it's important, at least for me, to recognize, for me, I'm much the same way, but I don't need them to be as far in that journey or even ahead of me in that journey, although that's great and it's important to have those people as well. But even someone, like you said, someone who might be fresher in their journey, someone who might still be in the beginning stages of figuring out what their new identity is and figuring out how to step into that role, as long as they want to be there, as long as they want to take the journey, that's all that's required. That's the entrance criteria.
Yeah, I mean, we just started a new series yesterday called Young Trainer, Old Coach. And it's a trainer that I've been mentoring. And he pushes me on the fitness, education, nutrition, psychology journey. Yes, I am light years ahead of him. But one of the great things that he brings is he makes me go back to the basics.
Mm-hmm.
And just goes, why? And I'm like, man, I don't remember. Oh yeah, I should probably go look at that again. And there's something very powerful about that. And is that making me better?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, one of
A
those
side
people,
note on that. Sorry.
go ahead,
All right,
side
go
note,
ahead.
please.
My side note was in thinking about back to the basics. It's, we see this often as coaches, and I don't know if it was your journey with fitness, but it certainly was mine. In the beginning of my career, and for myself, it was a lot of complexity in my programming, in my nutrition, a lot of complexity. And over time, it's gotten more and more simple. And it's funny that we start with the basics, we get really complicated to ultimately end up back at the basics. And so I wanted to make the note, if you're starting out, or if you're worried about things being super complex or trying to make them super complex, or if you're just starting with the basics, just keep with the basics. You're going to end up there anyways. That's all you need.
Really is. That's legitimately why everything, as you see my message, it's just the same message over and over and over and over and over and over again. So if you want to see that, follow me. But it's two principles. How would this look if it was simple? And the answer is love. If you keep things simple and operate out of love for yourself, I don't really see how you could fail.
I love that, sir.
Really don't. And here's the funny thing, if we may dive into that, right? Well, if I choose that cookie because I'm with, let's say you and I are hanging out, right? Because let's say you moved to Charleston and we're hanging out and we're having some shrimp and grits and some fried green tomatoes and some pecan pie, which sounds incredible right now. Somebody would say, well, how does that line up with fit, happy, and healthy? How is that loving yourself? Well, because there is joy in that community. Now, and that is a happy thing. We are supposed to embrace that. Now, if I feel guilt or shame around it later, that's no longer operating out of love.
Right.
And what does a loving identity of yourself look like? Make it very, very simple. What does the version of you would like to be look like? And simply take simple steps, acting out of love for yourself to become that person. And no, I don't believe that is faking it until you make it, because you're going to have to encounter a lot of hurdles to get there. I believe that's facing it until you make it. And how do you overcome that? With more dadgum love.
Mm-hmm.
And embracing the suck.
Embracing the suck. Yeah. And I think it's important, to a point that you made, part of this identity adoption also comes down to, in figuring out what that is, also comes down to, and you've alluded to this a couple of times, what is your core values as a person?
Okay.
And then how do you thoughts, beliefs, and actions align with those core values? So to your, our splendid Southern spread of all the delicious foods, someone who is trying to be really lean and really thin, that might give them a lot of anxiety or guilt in having that meal. And the way that I think about it from where I am now is going back to my core values, which is some of which are personal growth, connection, freedom of both my time and my ability to experience the world in the way that I see fit. And so in that moment of you and I together having this spread, yeah, I'd like to be fit. I like to have a certain level of leanness because I feel confident that way, and all that's great. But that's not my core value. In this moment, one of my core values being connection, we're connecting and we're having this experience. And I have the freedom, the food freedom to enjoy this food and know how to get myself back on track and know how to not let it derail my overall health. And so in that moment, those things are, even if it's homemade pecan pie, the best the South has to offer, in that moment, it is in line with my identity.
It is. And with looking at that and to take it a step further, if you sit there and binge on it to the point where you feel sick and all you can focus on is your stomach, now it doesn't line up anymore. So that brings up a point in question. Every time somebody asks me for the first time, what do I do? I'm going to travel. I'm going to a wedding. I'm going to the thing. What do I do? Remember why you're there.
Yeah, 100%.
Why are you there? To celebrate the wedding. Yeah. We're going on a date night. Great. Freaking enjoy it. Enjoy the day. But remember why you're there. I love that. I think that's a great place to stop because we could go down the identity thing a million times. I'm looking at my watch. Brother, if there is one piece of advice, one step you could give somebody to take toward setting up their new identity of a healthy, happy person that they want to become, what would it be?
Ooh, I wish I would have given this some thought for something truly profound. But what I'm going to leave with is this. We talked a lot about being vulnerable with yourself, developing radical introspection, identifying your shortcomings, and taking responsibility for your faults. And so as someone considers how to navigate that, how to form what their identity is, probably the best piece of advice I can give is to show yourself grace for those shortcomings. Because that is the only way through to acknowledge them and to change them, to improve them, is to first give yourself grace so you don't shut down once you've discovered that about yourself.
I freaking love it. I absolutely love it. And it is grace, which then leads to conviction to continue to grow, never condemnation.
Absolutely.
Brother, I really appreciate your time. Where can people find you?
I would definitely recommend following me online on Instagram @_18fit_. Check it out there. Lots of fitness, psychology content, some goofy stuff. Occasionally you see my dancing videos because I bachata and salsa dance, so it's some fun mixed in. Ultimately, the main thing for me is we're learning things, we're discovering things about myself or about ourselves, and we're having a good time in the process. So you mentioned the silent movie and what would that look like. My ultimate mission is more smiles than anything else.
I love that. And what is your Instagram or Facebook handle or website?
It's so they can find me on Instagram @_18fit_, or they can go to 18fit.com for a website. And Facebook is just my name, Alex.McBrary, which is impossible to spell, but that's neither here nor there.
Alex, I appreciate it, brother. I look forward to not only pecan pie, hopefully later this year, but also introducing you to tomato pie.
Ooh, that's not one I've had before. Looking forward to it, brother. I appreciate you so much.
I look forward to it too. And again, thank you so much for your time today, brother.
Appreciate
All
you.
right.